Hello, and welcome to Wellness Wednesday, where experts share insights on topics that are important to pancreatic cancer patients, survivors, and caretakers. I'm Angela Horn with Rolfe Pancreatic Cancer Foundation, and today we are partnering with Cancer Wellness Center, Tempus and TriCan Health to discuss leveraging AI, navigating treatments and trials. For those of you new to our organization, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Rolfe Pancreatic Cancer Foundation. We are a Chicago-based research foundation that funds early detection pancreatic cancer research at some of the nation's top institutions. We connect patients and families with medical experts, personalize resources and education, and we raise awareness to heighten the public's understanding of the disease, its symptoms, and its risk factors. We host fundraising and awareness events throughout the year and also conduct quarterly Wellness Wednesday programs to bring a range of engaging topics to our pancreatic cancer community. Before we introduce today's speaker, I'd like to welcome our co-presenter from Cancer Wellness Center, Savina Chacheva. Hi, Savina.
Thank you so much, Angela, and thank you to the Rolfe Pancreatic Cancer Foundation for partnering with us again today. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Savina Chacheva. I'm the program director at the Cancer Wellness Center. For those of you who are new to the center, I would like to share a little bit more about the organization. The center was founded in 1989 as a nonprofit organization with the mission to help anyone touched by cancer find a way forward. We know that cancer changes life in so many ways, physically, emotionally, and socially, and we are here to make sure that no one has to face cancer alone. We do this by offering free programs that meet people where they're at. Through counseling and support groups, we help individuals and families manage the mental and emotional impact of cancer. Wellness classes like yoga, meditation, nutrition, and more provide a holistic approach to healthy living. And through education programs like this one, we empower people with practical information to help them feel more informed. Whether you're newly diagnosed, in treatment, post treatment, or supporting a loved one, our goal is to create a safe space where you can connect, learn, and feel supported. All of our services are available both in person and virtually because we believe that care should be accessible to everyone. If you would like to learn more about the center and connect to our free programs and services, please visit cancerwellness.org and the link will be included in the chat. I would now like to turn it over back to Angela.
Thank you, Savina. We're so grateful to partner again with Cancer Wellness Center and highlight the wonderful programs you provide for cancer patients and their loved ones. Today, we have with us Max Banaszak with Tempus and Dr. Kimya Harris and Mike Harris of TriCan Health to discuss the benefits of AI in the cancer treatment and clinical trial space. We hope from our time together, viewers can gain better insight into how AI is being used to support cancer care, enhance communication between patients and doctors, and make clinical trials more accessible. We'll begin our presentation with Mr. Banaszak and demonstrations of Tempus's AI tool, Olivia, then introduce Dr. Harris and Mr. Harris to discuss more about clinical trials and TriCan Health's use of AI to further their mission. Our session will conclude with a Q&A featuring presenters. So if you have questions, we encourage you to type them in the comments section below. If you prefer to submit anonymously, you can email us at info@rolfefoundation.org. That's info at rolfefoundation.org. We'll be saving all questions until the end to make sure we're able to get to as many as possible. Max Banaszak, Chief of Staff at Tempus, helps lead AI innovation, including the development of David, a physician co-pilot, and Olivia, a patient health concierge. His work focuses on expanding access to AI-powered tools that improve care through collaboration with health systems, life science companies, and advocacy groups. Max, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So today I just wanted to go over two core things. One, share with this group a little bit more about who Tempus is and what our mission is. And then two, we'll go a little deeper into our new patient-facing tool, Olivia, and how we think it might be able to help. So Tempus was started around 10 years ago when our founder experienced cancer within his family. He had previously started a bunch of technology companies and was complexed by how little technology, data, and intelligence were infused into the healthcare ecosystem. And we started with this mission of helping physicians get better data at their fingertips when making a decision and providing more intelligent insights to help them guide what's the right next step for a patient. We started doing that by generating a lot of molecular data. Sometimes when a doctor is making a decision, the most important factor in considering what treatment a patient should go on is a molecular result emanating from their DNA or their RNA. And so today, Tempus sequences hundreds of thousands of cancer patients and many more 100,000 patients looking for these rare genetic mutations that could give a doctor an insight onto what treatment could best support them. Now, we generate a lot of this data, but we also want to help physicians make sense of it. And so Tempus brings in a bunch of clinical information around that patient to marry with that molecular result so that we can try and tell a doctor something intelligent. We don't just say there's a mutation, but we say this patient has this disease with this mutation, and they've already tried a drug and it didn't work. So here's some next steps you should consider. All of this is really important for doctors as treating patients becomes harder and harder and more complex and complex. We have dozens of new therapies that are approved each year and even more clinical trials that doctors can consider patients for. And so they need tools and technology to help them make those right decisions. Now, about 2 years ago, we realized we had chipped away at a lot of the problem for doctors, and we'd built a lot of great tools and technologies to help them. But we hadn't yet done that for patients. And patients are bearing more and more of the burden of quarterbacking their care, managing their care, asking the right questions, and understanding what's going on, ultimately to self-advocate so that they can get the best care possible. And so we started on this journey of building Olivia, taking those lessons that we learned from Tempus and helping doctors and building Olivia to use those same core principles, making sure patients had all of their data in one central place, and then two, layering intelligence on top of that to help. So I want to show just a little bit of what Olivia can do for folks. So I'll present my screen. Perfect. So Olivia can help patients bring data in a few core ways. Patients can manually add their health records, or they can simply find the providers where they're receiving care, connect to that institution, and Olivia will pull that data in every hour for something like 6 to 12 months until it needs a refresh. We have about 25,000 institutions that patients can find and immediately connect that institution to Olivia. Once a patient does that, their information begins to show up in our record timeline. This is a chronologically ordered view of everything that's happening, things like medical imaging, lab results, visit overviews. Patients can see this quickly. They can also click in to understand what's going on at a deeper level, seeing lab results that are within a normal range or things that might be outside of it. Now, clinical data is just one piece that folks need to keep track of if they're dealing with a serious or chronic illness. We also want patients to be empowered to understand what their doctor is saying, what's happening in the room, and what they have to do next. So Olivia has a place where you can journal and take notes, but also where you can record your visits with the consent of your physician so that you can remember every single word that was said and search back on those transcripts later. As data comes in, patients can also have a quick access to things like easy to find smart summary, easy to access medical details, things like diagnosis, smoking status, allergies, current medications, and even care team for reference back to when you're in a appointment and need to remember what's happening. Pulling all of that in, though, is more complexity a lot of times for patients. We have folks that are connecting to 3, 4, 5 institutions, and that means hundreds or even thousands of records in that timeline. And so we wanted to give patients a tool to help them search that information, summarize it, and ultimately have some help in understanding what's going on. So for example, through Olivia, patients can ask questions like, can you explain my diagnosis and medications to me in a simple way? Now, our example patient here is a female patient that's dealing with breast cancer. It's a complex case. And so Olivia is going to go back and read through all of those records in the timeline, things that have been said in the notes, and provide an easy overview of what's going on. So information like stage is explained in simple and easy to understand language. We can characterize biomarker results like HR negative and HER2 positive, and what does that mean? Patients can get a simple overview of the medications they're on and how they're working, whether it's something like chemotherapy that's actually looking to stop cells from growing and dividing, or targeted therapies that are looking at that specific biomarker that's mentioned up above. Now, that's great, but we also want Olivia to act as a companion, reminding or helping patients remember things that they want to cover in their next visit. So patients can ask, what are 5 things I should discuss with my doctor during my next visit based on my records? It'll pull in things like any side effects you've been experiencing, maybe nausea. It'll make sure to flag, review blood test results with your doctor, discuss any upcoming treatments and the timelines of those, and any nutrition, hydration, support questions you want to ask. Now here we see that Olivia was able to actually notice a low white blood cell count. And so one of the core tenets of Olivia is we don't want to just provide answers. We want to show patients where they're coming from. And so any information Olivia references is always easily sourceable. So we can actually just click into that complete blood count, blood test record, and actually see that abnormal result that Olivia is referencing. We can go a bit further. We can ask questions like, have I received HER2 testing? Now, this is important maybe if you're seeing a new physician, or as we'll talk a little bit about later, as you could start to consider our clinical trials an option for me. A lot of times those studies have very intricate, what we call inclusion or exclusion criteria, which just means things you have to check before knowing if you can actually participate. Sometimes that language isn't worded well for patients. And so Olivia's there to help actually go understand, have I received HER2 testing? So that's going to be the end of our demonstration. Happy to answer more questions as we go through the webinar. But again, Tempus and Olivia are really built to do 2 core things. Make sure that when decisions are being made, physicians and now patients have all of the information they need at their fingertips, and begin to provide some intelligence on top of that to help make sense of everything.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Max. What an incredible comprehensive tool. Yes, as a reminder, we will be saving all questions for the Q&A section for the end of our session today, and we will do our best to address as many as we can. You can either jot your questions down in the comment section below or submit questions anonymously by emailing us at info@rolfefoundation.org. Next up are co-founders and executives of TriCan Health, Dr. Kimya Harris and Mike Harris. Kimya has dedicated more than 30 years to advancing cancer research and care as a scientist, executive, and patient. With a PhD in cancer cell biology and experience leading research and clinical development at top institutions and biopharma companies, she brings deep scientific and strategic expertise to her work. Having twice faced breast cancer herself, Kimya founded TriCan Health to empower patients and clinicians with better access to and understanding of clinical trials, combining her professional insight and personal journey to transform the patient experience. Mike Harris co-founded TriCan Health to empower cancer patients to take an active role in their care and make informed decisions about treatment, including participation in clinical trials. Drawing on his experience as global head of research at Gartner, he now applies his expertise in research, AI, and platform-based services to connect patients with advanced medicines and expand access to life-changing clinical trial opportunities. Thank you so much, both of you so much for joining us. Welcome, Dr. Kimya Harris and Mike Harris.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Angela, and great job, Max. That was really exciting, and I love that Olivia's designed to be interactive and to help patients, as you say, because they are bearing so much more of the burden and the need to self-advocate. And I really look forward to digging into Olivia. And thank you to Rolfe Foundation and Cancer Wellness Center for hosting this and for inviting us to come and join on this Wellness Wednesday. Our talk from TriCan Health is going to be divided into two parts as well. Part one is going to be about clinical trials. What are they? Why do they matter? And part two will be run by Mike, and he will be taking you through a demo of the TriCan platform and sharing a little bit about how we've used AI to build our platform and augment it. So, as Angela said, I'm Kimya Harris. I'm the CEO and co-founder of TriCan Health. And Mike, as you may have guessed from the last names, is not only my co-founder, but also my husband of 30 years. But we didn't always work together. We had two very separate careers. Mine was in cancer research and biotech and cancer drug development. And Mike's was in IT and AI and building unbiased matching platforms. And about 3 years ago, we decided to combine our professional expertise and start TriCan Health. But probably more important to why we started TriCan Health is not the credentials behind each of us, but really the why, the reason we started it. And for that, we have to go back to 2007. Mike and I were at my college reunion. We had had an amazing time. We were having so much fun with old friends, and we got a phone call. And the phone call was that our basement had flooded. And so that quickly put a damper on the fun that we were having, and we had to get on a plane and come home. And we were in the car driving home from the airport, and I was stressed. I was thinking about the basement and what was the water damage and the kids. And, I just maybe had a little too much to drink over the weekend, was a little hungover. And my mom called and she said, "Do you have a minute to talk?" And honestly, I was too stressed and I just sort of brushed her off. And I hung up the phone, and something in my gut told me that I need to talk to her. That wasn't a normal call from her. And I called her back and said, "Sorry, Mom, what's up?" And that was when she said, "I've been diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer." And that was like a defining moment. It felt like we were in the car. It felt like we drove over this line, life before my mom's diagnosis and life after. And she fought the disease for 18 months, and she fought hard. And at the same time that she was fighting the disease, I was battling breast cancer. So I know what it is to be a patient, and I know what it is to be a caregiver. I have sat on your side of the webinar before I sat on this side. And I know how important knowledge is when you're in that position, how incredibly important it is to find information, to advocate for yourself, and to feel like you have a little bit of control in a scenario that feels totally out of control. And we were lucky. So as I said, I had spent my whole career in cancer research. I literally have a PhD in cancer research. And my mom was an oncologist. So she spent her whole career treating cancer patients. And yet, even with all of our knowledge, our network, our ability to understand the disease and what's happening, we never learned about clinical trials as an option until it was too late. My mom ultimately participated in a clinical trial, but she did so at the very end of her battle. And by then she was too weakened by all the treatments, and she had the cancer had really just taken over her body. And so she unfortunately had to withdraw from the trial. But that experience really stayed with me, and it's ultimately what led me to start TriCan Health several years later. The recognition, and this is TriCan's mission, that every patient needs access to information about clinical trials. Every patient. And so TriCan Health is on a mission to make sure that happens. And a lot of what we do is education and sharing information. And so that's why we're here today. And Mike is on the technical side of what we do. And so he will talk a lot about the platform and AI, a bit more like Max talked about. But I'm a scientist. Clinical research is at the heart of everything I do and thinking about research. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about clinical trials, why they matter, what they are, and what are some of the myths around clinical trials that are not based in reality. So let's start first with the basics. What's a clinical trial versus standard of care? So I think standard of care is pretty intuitive. Most people understand that it's the widely accepted treatment option for somebody with a specific diagnosis. So for example, if you have stage 2 pancreatic cancer, standard of care is going to be surgery followed by FOLFIRINOX treatment. But FOLFIRINOX didn't just become standard of care overnight. It's not like somebody just said, and now we shall use FOLFIRINOX. FOLFIRINOX actually went through clinical testing before it was designated a standard of care. So you can see here in this image, FOLFIRINOX was initially discovered in, it's a combination of chemotherapy elements. It's actually 4 different chemotherapies. They were all known and approved chemotherapies, but they were never combined before. So the idea of combining them was first considered and so-called discovered back in 2000. It was tested a lot in the laboratory and in animals. And then in 2005, it went into clinical trials. And the clinical trials were designed to show if FOLFIRINOX was safe, was that combination safe, and was it effective and better than the standard treatments available at that time? And happily, the answer to both of those questions was yes. And in 2011, FOLFIRINOX became the new standard of care in pancreatic cancer. And I just want to point out that my mom was battling her pancreatic cancer in 2008 and 2009. She did not get access to FOLFIRINOX because it was not yet approved. But had she joined a clinical trial, maybe the outcome would have been different because FOLFIRINOX was in trials at that time. So let's turn to today. So the same diagram applies. It's just that today, the present is what we're looking at. So new treatments, new exciting therapies that are being developed are being researched, and they're in clinical trials now, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And hopefully some of them will prove to be safe and effective and better than what's currently available and will become the future standard of care. So let me give you an example of that. There is a drug. All drugs seem to have a mouthful of a name. So this one is, we're going to call it RMC 6236. Daraxonrasib is the real name. It's being developed by Revolution Medicines. This drug is what's called a targeted therapy. So in cancer, oftentimes there will be one specific protein that drug developers want to target so that the drug hits that protein, and then by hitting that protein, it kills the cancer cell. So in this case, the protein is called RAS. RAS is expressed in 90% of pancreatic cancer cells in a mutated form. So this drug hits RAS specifically, hits those mutants, and kills the cancer cell. And what's really exciting about this drug is that it's also a pill that makes it much, much easier for patients to take. They don't have to go into the hospital for infusions. So this drug went into clinical trials in 2022. It went into phase 1 trials. The results looked so exciting that they fast-tracked right into phase 3. They actually got to skip phase 2 and go right into phase 3 clinical trials, which started in 2024. And they're ongoing. And now there are 9 ongoing trials with this drug. And even the FDA has shown acknowledgement of the excitement around this drug. They've granted it breakthrough designation, priority review, and all of that basically means the FDA is saying, hey, we see a real urgent medical need here, and we're going to work with you to try to fast track it as long as it continues to look good. So we don't know the answer yet if it has passed through the phase 3 clinical trials, but there's a lot of hope and optimism about it. And right now, the only way to get access to this drug is through a clinical trial. So I hope that what I've shown you is that clinical trials are not just some wonky experiment that somebody is doing, in an offshoot of a lab. They are how every single drug that is approved today and every single drug of the future gets tested and developed. And so that's one of the biggest myths around clinical trials, and I think it's really important to understand that. Let's talk about a couple of the other myths around clinical trials. So myth number 1 is the placebo myth. And this is the idea that I will often hear people say, I don't want to participate in a clinical trial because I'm afraid I'm going to be given a placebo and be left untreated. So this is false. It is medically unethical to leave a cancer patient untreated. Cancer patients in a clinical trial will be treated with either the new treatment that's being tested, the current standard of care, or sometimes both if it's a combination clinical trial. The only time a patient in a cancer clinical trial does not get treated is if there is no treatment available for that patient. So just know that the idea that you could have treatments available and get a placebo is a myth. It's false. All right, myth number 2, the guinea pig myth. This is the idea, and I alluded to it earlier, that if you participate, people will say, I don't want to be in a clinical trial. I don't want to be anybody's guinea pig, right? This idea that clinical trials are just sort of, run by mad scientists that are literally just tinkering with humans. And this one's so prevalent that it showed up in Connections. I don't know how many of you out there are puzzlers that like to do Wordle and Connections. I do. And this was about 1.5 years ago. In Connections, you have to come up with 4 words that fit into sort of an overarching category. And the category here was one in a research study. And the very first word was guinea pig. So New York Times is not helping us dispel this myth. But it is a myth. Clinical trials are highly regulated. And in fact, they're not given the go-ahead. You can't run a clinical trial if you don't clearly show that it is safe for patients and designed for the benefit of the patient. It's not about tinkering around with new ideas. It has to be for the benefit of the patient. And in fact, patients that participate in clinical trials actually receive exceptional care and sometimes are more closely managed and closely monitored than those in standard of care. Myth number 3. This one is what I call the last resort myth. And the best way I can explain this is if I said to you, my mom has cancer and she is participating in a clinical trial, most of you would probably think, oh boy, that's not good. And that's because we think of clinical trials as something that comes after you have tried every other thing possibly available. And that is the wrong way to think of the clinical trial. It's not a Hail Mary pass. In fact, the national guidelines for cancer treatment say that clinical trials should be considered at every treatment decision by every patient from diagnosis on. And that's because there are a lot of trials that are designed for early stages of treatment. So if you wait too long, you won't qualify for a lot of the trials. And also because, like my mom, when you wait until the very end, your body is weakened by all the treatments, the cancer's had a chance to take over, and oftentimes it's too late to be beneficial. There's an amazing woman named Kay Kays. She is a 31-year survivor of pancreatic cancer. And she also is on a mission to make sure every patient is aware of clinical trials and has access to them. And she likes to say, clinical trials should not just be for dessert, they should be the appetizer too. So to summarize, if you take home anything from my part of this talk, it is that these three myths, the placebo, the guinea pig, the last resort, are just that. They are myths. Please know the truths behind them. Please share them with anyone you know, because the more people become informed, the more we can break down barriers to clinical trials. Now, I want to be clear. Clinical trials are a complex decision. They are not appropriate for every patient at every stage of their treatment journey, but they should be considered. The national guidelines say that you should be considering clinical trials at every stage. So talk to your doctor about them. Make the decision with your care team, with your family, with your loved ones. And my issue is that too often patients don't even know they are an option. When my mom was diagnosed, we thought we had all the knowledge and resources and network, and we didn't know it was an option until it was too late. And I'm left to wonder if she had participated in that full FOLFIRINOX trial, would she have had more time? Would she have had better time? I don't know. And I can't change that for her, but I can change it for many of you and for any patients in the future that are facing a diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. So I would urge you to talk to your doctors, learn about treatment. And TriCan Health was developed exactly for that purpose. We are here to help you learn about clinical trials and to help you find out about your clinical trial options so you can be informed and advocate for yourself and have that conversation with your doctor. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, who will take you through TriCan Health and show you how to do that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kimya. Thanks very much for that overview, and thanks also to Max. Just as a point, if folks are online watching a live stream, you can enter questions in the comments field. If you're attending the live webinar, you can enter it in the chat. And there was an email as well, which I think was info@rolfefoundation.org. So please submit any questions that you have, and we'll answer those at the end of this webinar. My name is Mike Harris, and what I want to do is share a little bit of information on how TriCan Health can practically make available the things that Kimya and to some extent what Max were just talking about, which is using information about your diagnosis or your loved one's diagnosis so that you can find the best next action for yourself in consultation with your medical team. It's easy enough to do by coming to tricanhealth.com. You can see the URL in the screen here. And the whole concept of TriCan Health is to provide a platform to help cancer patients find trial options. Right now, we're focused on pancreatic cancer, specifically in the United States. And it's looking at all actively recruiting trials that are happening within the country to help you find what those options might be, to make it as accessible and easy to find as possible. There's some additional information here that you can see. So this is a live view of our page. There's a Learn section where you can find more information about some questions to ask at each stage of your treatment, or a detailed article about placebos as Kimya just presented. So that's things about learning. But the most helpful information is here in Find a Trial, where you can do a live search looking for trial options depending on your particular diagnosis. There's a couple of ways. The easiest way is to use the browse function, which is specifically for patients and caregivers. So we'll just click browse here. And you can see that it just starts off asking, there's about half a dozen questions that are asked that help narrow down the set of potential trials for which you might qualify. And that gives you some options that you can then share and save with your physician, with your family members, and make sure that you have all the options known so that you can make the best choice for yourself. So let's run through a simple example. We'll say, what kind of cancer do you have? We show pancreatic cancer options specifically. And as you can see, we'll say, all right, let's look specifically at pancreatic ductal adenocarcinoma, or what's often known as PDAC, and click next. We'll look for trials close to you. Let's figure out what is close to Chicago, and you can click next. And for stage of your cancer, you might say, well, why are you asking me this question? For each of these, there are different information buttons that you can hover over. And this simply explains why we asked the question and how it's used to refine the trial options that you might have to look for. So in this case, you might say, well, my doctor never really told me what stage it was, so I don't know. So I'll click next. And then perhaps your doctor used some of these words instead. For example, they may have said that you have metastatic cancer, what's often known as stage 4. So we try to give different options to make it easy for a patient to rapidly navigate these choices. And if you already had any treatments for your cancer, as Max had mentioned, knowing which drugs you've already had can influence what trials you may or may not be eligible for in what is called that inclusion or exclusion criteria. In this case, we'll assume that the patient has had chemotherapy. And then we ask, well, which one of these have you had? And again, this talks about why we asked this question and some additional resources. But we'll say in this case, we'll use that standard of care that Kimya mentioned called FOLFIRINOX. And then we say next. We ask if surgery is an option for you at this time. Again, this identifies which trials might be appropriate and which ones might not. In this case, we'll say, nope, it's not an option. It's called inoperable or unresectable. And the last question that's asked is, do you have any biomarkers or genetic risks? Some of these are inherited, like BRCA1 or BRCA2. Some of these are specific mutations that are in the tumor itself, like KRAS, as Kimmy mentioned, that shows up in 90% of pancreatic cancers. In this case, we'll say, no, I haven't even had those tests yet. I'm newly diagnosed. I want to understand what my options are for stage 4 pancreatic cancer. And then I click next. I can choose how many results I want to see. We'll start with the ones that are close to you based on geographic proximity for which you might qualify, and we'll extend out from there. And we'll say, listen, let's start with the top 25 and see what might be available. So this is a summary that provides really in a single view, a single page, if you will, of a trial snapshot that summarizes a particular trial that's actively recruiting here in the Chicago area. It's a phase 2 trial. There's links to clinicaltrials.gov, which is the source of this information, which I'll talk about in a minute. And there's a lot of additional information about the trial that helps you understand more about it. There's a helpful summary of the trial, which summarizes what is the drug that's being tested. Are any of these drugs FDA approved for other indications? We'll understand if there are brand names that you might recognize for a particular drug. And it also shows how the medication is delivered. In this case, it requires an IV. In other cases, it's delivered via pill. And that helps you identify which trials might be most appealing to you. And of course, we show the location of the trial. What I find really helpful is it talks about these treatment groups. So to Kimya's point about the fear or concern of a placebo, in this case, we make it really explicit what the different groups in the trial would actually receive from a medication perspective. So here it lists the different drugs, and you can see that there's some difference between these two groups, but it shows you what your options would be in terms of which group you might be assigned to and which drugs you might be receiving as a result. There are links to additional resources. There's information about the line of therapy and the stage of cancer for which this is applicable. And then there's additional information for the overall study. And we'll see if there's any additional information here under this particular location. And indeed there is, with a phone number, email address, and additional information of the principal investigator. So what we've done is provide in a single page a lot of information about a particular trial that helps you understand how you might want to consider this in your treatment options. You can go through additional ones and see more. You can move back. And for any of these that are interested, you can save them and or share them with your medical team. So it's a super helpful way to rapidly see relevant clinical trials that are potentially appropriate for you in your next care, in your next stage of care. But what I wanted to do today was to show how we provide some of this information. And it's using artificial intelligence, AI, to actually bring some of this data to life. So let me change my screen here. Give me 1 second. I will come back to the presentation. And this is where we left off. But what I'll show you is an interesting way to view how we actually pull this information onto TriCanHealth.com. So this is a view of the site called clinicaltrials.gov. This is a site which the National Institutes of Health started many years ago to bring together all live clinical trials, not only in the US, but actually many trials happening all around the world. And in order to run a trial in the US, you have to register that trial onto this site. What this provides is a lot of information about each trial. Frankly, it's a little tough for the average person to navigate the site, to extract the right kinds of trials. And that's why we take this information from clinicaltrials.gov, we enhance it, we augment it using artificial intelligence to make it more accessible and readable on our site. So in this case, we'll use this source information from clinicaltrials.gov, but then we do something called prompt engineering, which is using one form of artificial intelligence. You might have heard of something called large language models. ChatGPT is the most popular one. We use one called Perplexity, and there are many others, Claude and others that you may have heard of. What's interesting to me as a person in technology is that we have to sort of coach the AI, the artificial intelligence, on the persona, the way that we want them, the way that we want it to write a summary in this case. So literally, this is a prompt that we have used to help generate some of those summaries on an individual trial. And we'll say, you are a medical writing assistant for TriCan Health. You want to write summaries that are clear, factual, and patient-friendly. We want to make sure that you're writing it for folks who may not have any scientific background. And this goes on and on. It's quite a long prompt, but it gives you an example of how we use artificial intelligence to extract information in an automated, high-speed way to simplify the task that we have of summarizing this information for you as a patient. And therefore, that information comes back to the trial snapshot, the summary of the trial, and uses that information to provide a summary. Now, we provide manual oversight to make sure that everything is accurate and correctly tagged, but we want to use AI to enhance and augment the skills that we have on staff to make sure that we can accelerate and be as responsive to new trials as they come out and make them accessible to all of you as patients right away. So hopefully that is a helpful summary of how to access trials and information on tricanhealth.com, how you can answer half a dozen questions in order to actually find information about particular trials, and how we use AI to accelerate and speed the pace of extraction of information, to summarize it in a way that hopefully is a bit easier to understand and read, and then to use that information to inform your next treatment decision. Collectively, this session, both from Tempus and from TriCan Health, hopefully we've been able to show you how physicians and patients can analyze complex data to uncover new insights using artificial intelligence, how AI actually helps personalize care and improve outcomes, and how we simplify the process for finding and joining clinical trials. So with that, I'll stop sharing and I'll hand it back to Angela to manage our Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Kimya and Mike, taking us through such an encompassing look through what TriCan Health does, not only addressing concerns and myths about clinical trials so that way people feel more comfortable to get access to them as soon as possible, with walking us through TriCan's tool, and then also pulling back the curtain on how AI does the work for us. Thank you so much for such a 360 look at that. We will now open up for questions. Several have come through during the presentations, but if you have additional questions, please continue to ask. Again, this will be my last reminder. If you don't feel comfortable doing so in the chat, you can always email us anonymously at info@rolfefoundation.org. As always, this is a reminder that our Wellness Wednesday programming is strictly educational. We understand the subject matter is very personal, and while we want to answer everyone's questions, we unfortunately must refrain from questions targeting individual medical advice. Please seek out your trusted medical team for issues related to your specific health situation. All right. From what I see here with some of the questions, some of them are going to be organization specific, like, for Tempest or for TriCan, and then others will be a broad question for both entities to answer. So to get started with us here, I want to address, there's a question here that says, how do both companies speak to folks who may be wary of AI in general? What method do you use to approach the conversation that you aren't selling your data? Instead, you're using it to help yourself. And whoever would like to jump in is welcome to do so.
Sure, I could take a first shot at that. I think it's really important to think about AI as a tool, not a substitute. So I actually wish that the term adopted were augmented intelligence instead of artificial intelligence, because I think that's a more accurate description. What I found in literally every instance of AI implementation is that it is supplementing a process, an infrastructure, a body of knowledge, which has people and insight or science at its heart, and it is augmenting or helping that. So to answer the question specifically, I think the way that we've addressed it within TriCan is it's kind of behind the scenes. What we have is a platform. It's a software tool. It's available on the web. We don't require the user to share all their information. We just have them answer half a dozen questions, and they can even do so anonymously. We don't ask for name and information and things. You can do so under the radar if you wish, because we wanted people to have access to the information so that they can make health decisions without giving us all that info. If they choose to share it with their physician, with their medical team, that's great, but they don't have to share it with us. We want them, the user, to have access and control over their information and choose what they choose to share. So that's how we've approached it, is to keep augmented intelligence in the background, if you will, in order to make it as accessible and useful for people as possible.
Great.
I,
Max?
on the Tempest side of things, specifically for Olivia, I think we've approached things very similarly. So from a data perspective, being very clear about patients having total control, ownership, and permissions on where and how their data is used in an active manner. So for Olivia, patients that sign up, their data goes nowhere that a patient doesn't tell it to be shared with. So they have active control to share that with the doctor, but we aren't sharing any information on their behalf. It's their own personal kind of container for all of their information that they need to help them through their journey. When we think about implementing AI on top of that, it's, to Mike's point, a very new technology. And so there's a few core things we try and do to help folks make sure it's helping them and it's supporting them and it's not adding more confusion. Things like sourcing where it's answering questions from so that it can always be verified by a patient or by a doctor is one way we take steps to make sure AI is helping, not hurting. We also partner with trusted resources so that when you get an answer, you can see where it's coming from and actually go read that yourself. And for us, we think about it more as being able to have kind of a person by your side in a limited fashion for those that don't have the privilege of having somebody like Kimya advocating for them as they go through a difficult journey, remembering things that happened, helping explain things, going and finding those pieces of information. We think if employed in the right manner, AI can over time do more and more of those things to help patients make sure they have somebody always there for them, even if they don't have somebody physically there with them at all times.
Great. As a quick follow-up, I think on this topic, another user asked, for Tempus and TriCan, is the personal data shared, kept safe, and could it affect insurability?
From TriCan perspective, it is not shared. It is kept safe. We go through a lot of checks to make sure that it is, battle hardened and kept in secure servers here, and importantly also within the country. So specifically hosted within the U.S. And I think it's important for folks to recognize that, as Max suggested, they have control over that information and whether or not it's shared. So from an insurability perspective, there's no impact from our perspective because insurers don't have access to the information, unless the patient chooses to share it with their physician.
Great.
I just wanted to chime in and add that, when we designed TriCan Health, we really had the patient in mind. And so part of what we did intentionally is allow patients to use it for free, do their searching without ever registering. So, you don't have to share any of your data. You get more, the site has more value, I think, once you become comfortable with it, trust it, and say, okay, I am going to register because now I can, have more functionality. I can save more trials, share more trials. But a lot of that sort of mistrust is something we acknowledged as we designed it and said, let's let users use it. You can save up to 3 trials without ever registering, because we want people to trust it and feel comfortable and then register and use it more frequently.
Oh, great. Okay, wonderful. Anything to add there, Max?
I was just gonna say we also keep data safe, secure. We aren't sharing it with anybody outside of who users kind of actively direct us to share data with. We follow very rigorous security and privacy measures and make sure we're clearly communicating to folks throughout the journey the rights that they have to their data.
Wonderful. Max, for Tempus, are there certain types of cancer? So TriCan focused in on pancreatic cancer, which obviously is what our community is here joining us for today. Are there certain types of cancer that Tempus's data specializes in?
So Tempus actually helps oncologists across the board. So we have over 50% of oncologists in the United States that order or interact with a Tempus test every year. And so we actually help patients and physicians across kind of the oncology spectrum: lung cancer, breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, colorectal cancer, et cetera. So not specifically focused in one. And our goal in building Olivia was making sure that patients, irregardless of the cancer they are diagnosed with, or even some of the chronic conditions they might have as comorbidities, could get that information in one place and have a layer that could help translate it for them and support them. So that if you go to a website like TriCan and you come across a question you might not know the answer to, you've got a very easy way to kind of understand, okay, am I HER2 positive? Am I on docetaxel? Words that might not mean something to an everyday person, but can easily be translated through the combination of data and intelligence.
Great, thank you. For TriCan Health, how up to date are the clinical trials on the site and within the tool? It feels daunting to see all of the trials. How do you keep current?
Great question. It is daunting. That's part of how we're trying to help is by simplifying the information. We start our search with a pull from, as Mike said, the government registry, which is clinicaltrials.gov. And then we enhance and augment the information. We do that poll every week. So we're getting weekly updates where we are then able to update which sites are active, which trials are active, and then any new trials that come online. And it's really interesting. I was somewhat surprised by this. There are roughly 2 new pancreatic trials every week, which
Wow,
I thought that was amazing.
that's
And,
so that's so
and about
heartening.
30 are updated each week as
Yep.
well, with different locations or different changes. So
Yep.
there is a lot of activity each week, and we have the ability for folks to get an email on a weekly basis to say, hey, are there new trials that for which I might qualify? If you register, you can provide that information and get that kind of update so that you can stay up to date on things that are current.
That's right. The update can come to you if you register and request it.
Oh, fantastic. So that actually maybe dovetails a little bit into we have some questions in regards to like computer access, being savvy, these sort of things. A question being, what if you aren't good at using your computer to do either of your companies? What if you aren't good at using your computer? Do either of your companies offer any help to set up if you're not computer savvy? Yay. TriCan?
Sure. To prove computer savvy, I've got to find my mute button on the
Yes.
Zoom. But we do not offer a concierge level service at this point to help
Okay.
navigate. But what we have found is on an ad hoc basis, we can do so. So on an individual basis, there's contact information on our site and you can reach out to us and we'll be happy to assist. But what we found is that we designed it so that it's actually optimized for a mobile phone. So it's actually designed to be something as simple that you can navigate through a few questions on your phone device. And most people have been able to do so. What we've also found is that a caregiver, a family member can help navigate if someone is really just uncomfortable using any type of computer at all, and that's fine. So that's how we've approached it. And I'll turn it over to Max to address his point. But I think I saw, Max, that you might have both text and audio input as well. Did I see that correctly?
Yes. So we do offer support in setting up the account. We've got folks available during normal business hours that can hop on a phone, can hop on the meeting, and actually walk folks through how to set up their Olivia account. We also have tried to make it as easy as possible to interact once your information's in and you're looking for help. So to Mike's point, text as an input, voice as an input, easy and natural responses back. And we are here to help if folks ever face kind of a challenge getting up and running with something like Olivia.
Great. And for Tempus, can anyone use Olivia? Like, how does a patient access the tool?
So Olivia is both on the web and is an app you can find in your app store or Android. Anybody can sign up. It is free for 14 days, and then we do have a monthly fee of $12.99 after that.
Great. Thank you for that transparency. We have joining us certainly some caregivers in regards to pancreatic cancer and those who are loved ones of folks who are battling. So in regards to caregiving for both entities, how do you anticipate AI impacting cancer care for caregivers? We'll start with TriCan.
One of the things I think AI helps a great deal is what AI is really good at is to get information from a lot of different sources and to bring it together and assimilate that in a way that is accessible, readable, and can summarize and be able to drill into additional details as necessary. So I think that's a powerful combination. So from a caregiver perspective, to be able to look and say, okay, let's say 5 years ago, before ChatGPT and before everyone was using AI, you would do a Google search and say, in fact, we've looked at this analysis. People search for pancreatic cancer, then they search for what treatments are available for pancreatic cancer. And then they start to get a lot of information, and then you'll see folks talk online and they say, and then we go down the rabbit hole and get into a lot of details and things, and they get a little bit lost. Where I think AI is really helpful for a caregiver is to summarize that information and keep it up to a level that's appropriate depending on where you're asking the question, and then dive into the subcomponents that are most helpful. And I'd encourage you to use the tools that are available with a grain of salt, which is they're pulling from a variety of sources, and you want to use authoritative sources for really important decisions. So that's why TriCan Health uses specifically clinicaltrials.gov. So it's a registered repository of information as our primary source. And I'm sure from a Tempus perspective, as Max said, pulling in from the patient's medical records and then showing those specific links of what the sources are. I think that's a really important transparency that caregivers can benefit from, to know that AI can synthesize things, but also show you where the sources of that information come from.
And I'll just chime in on that as well and say, my mantra is trust but verify.
Yes.
I'm a researcher, so I'm going to want to know exactly where that came from. And I think that's really important. And I think knowing what resources are out there, TriCan Health, Olivia sounds amazing. And also the advocacy groups. I'm doing my plug here for Rolfe Foundation and Cancer Wellness. Cancer Wellness Center, use those resources as a way to verify, right? I mean, AI can pull together huge amounts of information for you, as Mike said, and summarize it and go deep and get stuff done in far less time than any individual could. But then know that you have all these resources out there that are trusted resources, so use them to verify.
And to interpret.
And to interpret.
And to interpret, yeah. From Tempus's perspective, are there any additional thoughts on that?
I think Mike and Kimya covered it excellent. From a high level, I think just two specific points. The only other thing I think we'd add is sometimes as a caregiver, it still takes a village. And so you're often in search of kind of transparency. What happened at that last visit? What testing was already done? And having tools like AI that can actually listen into conversations, can summarize it, and can go get those bits of information later, even if you weren't in the room, are really helpful for those that are trying to bridge the gap between helping a patient and a loved one, working with physician and care teams, and maybe even seeking help from other folks in kind of their community or their village who might be able to provide some guidance. And so we really think about how do we empower that caregiver and the patient to make sure they're giving the right information to every single person that they're looking for help from.
Great. Which leads to, in regards to sharing the information and things like that, for both TriCan and for Olivia, are the accounts such that they are so personal that each person, meaning the patient, meaning the caregiver, everything, do there need to be multiple accounts, or is there a way um, of access, within a team? What does it look like to have multiple accounts or single accounts? Can you kind of speak a little bit to what that dynamic looks like? And we'll start with Max.
Yep, I'll take that to start. Right now, Olivia today has kind of two account concepts. One, you can set up an account for yourself, or two, you can set up an account as a caregiver for a patient. So there's kind of dual access. Coming soon in the future, we'll implement more of a team-based sort of account where you can have kind of one-to-many relationships, many people helping to manage kind of one patient they might be taking care of, or one caregiver having many patients they're helping to take care of, so that we can have more folks in the loop with that same level of information.
Great.
And from our perspective, what we wanted to do was offer accounts that can be established, registered for each individual user. And the most common combination is the physician and the patient. So a physician can establish their account and they might save searches for 5 different patients. And they can save those and say it's, for patient A in Chicago and patient B in San Diego. And they can save those as 2 different searches. They can keep them anonymous and they can put the information that they want in terms of diagnosis, prior treatments, geographic location, biomarkers, and so forth. And that way they can go back to those searches and find trials for those particular patients whenever they want. In parallel, the patient, say the one in Chicago and the one in San Diego, would each establish their own accounts and could do their own searches, and they can compare notes with their physician. So we don't have the two link because that makes it just more complex from a privacy and control perspective. So we wanted to keep it as controlled as possible for the individual patient. But that information can be shared where they can say, hey, listen, I'm looking at this trial. Do you see the same one? And they can send an email and share that specific trial from back and forth to one another. So we've tried to make it easy to share while still maintaining separate access.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Hopping back a little bit to in regards to costs associated with these programs. Tempest mentioned the $12.99 fee after 2 weeks free. What about TriCan Health and the registration there? Are there costs involved?
There are no costs involved for using the TriCan Health tool. That's very intentional on our part. Our hope is that cost would not be a barrier to finding information about clinical trials, and so we want to make it as easy as possible for patients to use our tool.
Great, wonderful. Thank you for clarifying. Max, is the Olivia tool only for medical and treatment information, or do you envision it may be used in the future to connect patients to cancer support services? For example, could it integrate a mental health screening? And if patient needs a mental health professional, could they provide referrals for services?
Uh, It'd be lovely to have in the future. I think right now we're laser focused on making sure we can get the core fundamentals right, making sure patients can get all of their information in. So 6 months ago, they could only connect to 400 institutions. Today it's 25,000. And now making sure that the intelligence they get on top of that is supportive and helpful. But we're excited to continue to partner with groups that are good at connecting patients to support systems and to providers like patient advocacy groups and Rolfe in particular, so that they always have somebody to go to if they do need those services in the future.
Great. Wonderful. TriCan. Currently, clinicaltrials.gov has a notice on the website that it is not up to date. Does TriCan only use that site to locate trials? Uh, worried that it's all encompassing, worried it's not all encompassing. Do you obtain trials from other country clinical trial sites? I know you mentioned that it's US based, but in the face of that notice from clinicaltrials.gov, does it only use that site to locate trials?
So yes, that notice is there. I can tell you, because we get the weekly updates, that the updates are still coming through. So I think that disclaimer is sort of a, all encompassing, don't blame us if you don't find all the information you need because the government's shut down. We are still getting updates. We are still getting notifications about new trials. So far, I feel comfortable that we are receiving updated information. Um, it's a great question in terms of using that one site to access trial information. And one of the things TriCan is working to do is work directly with the site sponsors, so the companies that run the trials, as well as the individual PIs, they're called. So the people that run the trials at the hospitals, and get the information that is most updated directly from them, because that's, to me, that's the ideal world where we don't have to use clinicaltrials.gov. We can get it direct from the source.
Yes, absolutely. Max, you were nodding your head there in regards to Olivia and with Tempus's ability to source. Did you have any additional comment to that?
I was just going to say Olivia today uses clinicaltrials.gov just like TriCan,
Okay.
but Tempus as a whole actually helps a lot on kind of clinical trial recruitment and even enrollment for a subset of our sites. And we find, just to Kimya's point, our sites and our sponsors, the pharma companies that develop these new therapies, have the most up-to-date information. And so they're a great source to be kind of that final stop as you're kind of navigating that journey to check, is everything up to date? Is this the right fit for me? And that's why it's so great to have them in the loop.
Absolutely. So both tools are created to provide access to simplify the process, to demystify the daunting process of a cancer diagnosis and what that means for a journey. One of our viewers asked, as AI tools are introduced into clinical settings, how can we make sure they don't widen existing disparities in cancer diagnosis and treatment access? Are there any thoughts on that? And whoever would like to start can do so.
It's a good question. With the introduction of any new technology, there's always a double-edged sword, where some things that could have a negative impact and also things that could have a real positive impact. So one of the things we're seeing from a positive impact perspective, and this is outside of the narrower conversation for today, but if you think of AI application in the healthcare setting in general, what it's allowing is instantaneous language translation. So if anybody on the line is not a native English speaker, or you have cared for patients who are recently immigrated to the country and maybe have a rather narrow cast language that isn't commonly spoken in that particular community, access to an AI translation tool can be literally life-saving. So that's something that could be super helpful. Secondly, is some of the medical scribe roles where someone has taken notes during a patient-doctor meeting, to be able to capture that with an AI audio capture, immediately transcribe and immediately summarize that information can be super helpful for the patient, who often is overwhelmed with all the terminology and language that's being thrown at them, to actually have time to go back, access the record and the summary, and to see what the questions are, and then maybe even copy and paste it into an AI to actually summarize it for them and dive additional questions, as Max was suggesting. That can be super helpful. Now, will absolutely everyone have a mobile phone? No, and that can in fact increase disparity. But as technology becomes more and more prevalent, the hope, the intent is for a lot of these tools to be accessible to all.
I was just going to add, I think we've talked a lot about around how patients and physicians interact directly with AI, but AI is actually also bringing forward a really great opportunity in cancer specifically, where a lot of these treatment pathways are kind of mapped out. So step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And at each of those steps, you kind of pause and figure out what's the right next step. For TriCan and their mission, a lot of that's focused on clinical trials, but often there's a few things a doctor should be considering. But again, cancer's gotten so complex that even those easy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 step pathways, folks are kind of falling off. They're not ordering a test. They're not reviewing that result. They're not kind of on the right path. And so we actually have tools and technology at Tempus outside of Olivia that help kind of flag where that care gap has kind of emerged and let a physician know, hey, we did step 1 and 2, but we didn't do step 3. Let's get back on the right care pathway. And so that's one of the ways that regardless of who the patient is, AI can kind of help doctors make sure that they're on the right path and considering all the right options.
Yes, especially if there are options that have been, like, stones unturned and that kind of idea.
Angela, I would just jump in as well and say, I think Max, it's fantastic that Tempus is sort of trying to fill in the places where patients fall through the gaps. And I would add that another place is that 80% of cancer patients are seen outside of these large institutions where the trials are being conducted. And for me, that's sort of the fundamental access issue is if you're not at the right center, you might not ever be told about clinical trials as an option. And so that's really where we are trying to bridge that gap and make sure everyone is told about the trials. So like Tempus, we're trying to fill in the care gaps that currently exist and that lead to these discrepancies in access to care.
Absolutely. And to also throw our hat in the ring, so is Rolfe Foundation. We absolutely have a patient support arm that we use to navigate platforms such as yours, to navigate to help individuals not only in the Chicago area, but also, on a national scale, to be a person, be to advocate for them and connect them within these institutions and get the help that they need, with we hope, um, the best chance possible. So everyone on this call, Rolfe Foundation included, we are here for you. So if anyone on this call absolutely needs it, here are at a minimum 3 resources for you to be able to connect you with the care that you need. And that is also comprehensively, not necessarily just medical, just to medical venues, but also, there was discussion of like a mental health and things like that. You can reach out to us and see if we may be able to lead you in the right direction for some wraparound care. All right, folks, we are, speaking of wrapping up, we have just a few more minutes here. So I'd actually like to ask the crowd, for TriCan and for Tempus, what are 3 takeaways you hope people walk away with from this conversation? And we will go ahead and start with Max on that. 3 takeaways you hope people walk away from this.
All right. I might steal one of Kimya's and Mike's, so
Okay.
I apologize. But I think for us, the 3 things are 1, your data is available and accessible for you to help inform questions you might want to ask, understand what's going on. 2, there are new tools and technologies, which we called AI here, but are just an intelligent layer on top of that to help you make sense, translate, and support. And then 3, the one I'm going to steal is clinical trials are an option at every step of your journey, not just at the last step. And so when you think about self-advocating and understanding your options, clinical trials are a great thing to consider at every point of the journey.
Steal
Wonderful.
away, Max. That was music to my
Yeah.
ear.
It's worth repeating.
Exactly. Clinical trials are an option at every step of your journey. But I'm gonna come up with a different 3 for TriCan.
Great.
One is, as Mike said, think of AI as augmented intelligence. It can enhance information, so use it as a tool to do just that. Use it as a tool to help you navigate and then trust but verify. Number 2, don't assume somebody else is looking on your behalf. Be informed, be proactive. Max, you talked at the beginning about how the burden is now so often on the patient. And while I wish that wasn't the case, it is. And Therefore, it's really important that the patient be proactive and get the information and then take it to your doctors and engage in that conversation. And number three, sort of reiterating the take-home point that Max said as well, and that is don't wait to find information specifically about clinical trials. Start now. Become informed. Even if you are on an amazing treatment right now, have it in your back pocket.
Fantastic. The time is now. So thank you all. Thank you so much to Mac Banizak of Tempus and Dr. Kimya Harris and Mike Harris of TriCan Health for sharing their time and expertise on such a cutting edge field in cancer treatment. Also, huge thank you as well to Cancer Wellness Center for partnering with us today. Thank you folks for being here with us. If there were questions in the chat that we were not able to get to, or if you are watching this on replay and you have additional questions, please reach out to us. Links for all parties involved are available in the chat, including more information about Rolfe Pancreatic Cancer Foundation and our upcoming gala on November 20th. Check out our website for more details and be sure to connect with us on social if you haven't already. We'll be announcing details for our next Wellness Wednesday soon. And if you have any ideas for future topics and speakers, please email us at info@rolfefoundation.org. Huge thanks to Cancer Wellness Center for partnering with us today. And on behalf of Rolfe Foundation and Cancer Wellness Center, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.